All right, thank you. Okay, like Lenny said, I'm Brad Feilmeier. I'm a Senior Principal Business Analyst with the Lab Informatics Group at Boehringer Ingelheim. The good news is, I think Sean covered about half of what I was going to say today. So I was laughing when you brought up the experience of the, I had a director come to me once, and he was, with everything we implemented, the one thing he said was, I'm so glad I don't get those escalation emails anymore. It saved him tons of time, but we had the same type of problem. So, okay. So I'll introduce myself real quick. My name is Brad Feilmeier, again. I've been in the pharmaceutical and animal health industries for 27 years. Started out at Pfizer and had a few jumps here and there and ended up at BI. Funny thing, I thought I'd live in Georgia for 3 to 5 years. That was almost 18 years ago now. So it's been quite a pleasure. I'm quite a nerd. When I was at Pfizer, one of the things we bought was early access to the Human Genome Database in 2000. And so we hired a ton of molecular biologists and a ton of IT people. And you can imagine how well the communication was there, right? It didn't happen. So my boss came to me and said, hey, how would you like to program? I'm like, sure, might as well complete the whole nerd circle. So here I am. About 4.5 years ago, so I'd been in the lab and then managing for years. And then about 4.5 years ago, the LNI team came and asked if I'd be willing to join. And I was like, yeah, I was kind of getting bored with molecular biology. I know I tell people that, but they're like, how do you get bored genetically modifying viruses and stuff? But you do. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about today. We had a unique problem with a group. And so what I want to do today is tell you more of what our company faces, the kind of things that we all are dealing with. I'm sure everybody here has a ton of data in the labs that's in Excel, that's buried somewhere that you can't actually use. So I'll go through some of the problems that we face, and then the IDBS products that we have and how we analyze them to solve one particular problem. And then we'll go through the solution that we came up with. We'll go through a case study on what we actually did and the results, and then where we're headed to next. Real quick, I need to tell you about our company. Our company is kind of complex. We have many sites globally, in Asia, in Europe, in the US, and doing many different types of things. So we have primarily animal health and pharma, and really they're two different beasts, the way everything operates. It's not like you can do one thing on one side and it translates automatically to the other. It's very different. So we work in pharmaceuticals, we work in vaccines, new biological entities. Quite a bit, it's pretty diverse. So right now we have about 2,500 users, roughly. It fluctuates a little bit, of which we have 3 developers that we have to support all these people, and I'm one of those people. So. Okay, the problems we face. So I think we all know, we all share the same problem. We all have too much data saved in Excel spreadsheets and on shared drives somewhere. The data is stored in multiple systems, multiple different ways, multiple different versions. I mean, raise your hands if you all face that problem. If you don't raise your hand, you're probably lying, right? We all know that. So the data that is out there is not easily shared. It's not easily searchable. Can't really do machine learning on it even. So what we're trying to do now is trying to get more things out of Excel using advanced, and we're trying to get it into more structured data, and we're trying also to increase the scientists' efficiency. And we have a big focus on getting the data out. We're pretty good about getting the data in, haven't been so good about getting the data out. So this is a slide that makes me cringe. This is the project that I was gonna talk about here. This is just one example, but I'm sure it mirrors a lot of what everybody sees. Imagine we have two groups here. We have an in vivo group that plans animal studies, and then we have a group who's responsible for doing the formulations for these studies. And one group has their own database system, and we'll just call it the clinical, what did I call it? Animal study planner, call it that, clinical planning system. This system is technically a database, but it's really not a planning system. It's really for designing the studies. So it was never meant for workflows. It was never meant for sending data out, putting data back in. It was really just for the in vivo team to do their study designs. So at one point, they had to figure out how they were going to get the data from the clinical planning tool to the people who actually make the formulations. And when I say formulations, these are the people that mix the compounds, the drugs, and for animal studies. And they decided, awfully, to go to SharePoint, right? They sent the data from their database to SharePoint. Well, what that meant for the for the formulations team is they had to go into SharePoint, and guess what they were using to do their formulations calculations with? Excel, right? So it meant that they were constantly going into SharePoint, and they'd have to go and copy and paste that data manually out of SharePoint into their Excel templates. And even worse, the templates weren't even standardized. So a lot of times the scientists would have to add rows, move things around, to make the calculations fit. So it was bad enough they had to go to SharePoint. Then they had to go to the compound library. Then they had to pull it, copy and paste a whole bunch of data in from that. Then they also had to figure out how to order the compounds. There was no standardized way to do that. And of course, all this data is ending up in Excel and even worse, PDFs. So it was getting very difficult to be able to track anything and mine it. And then of course, they finally do this Excel spreadsheet. Did I just break it? Okay. They do the spreadsheet, and where does it go into? It goes back into SharePoint, and it also goes back into a network share, and oftentimes on somebody's local drive. So guess what? You got 3 copies floating around. 3 copies of this thing. And it was pretty funny. I got to tell a quick little side story. I don't want to go over on time here, but it was really funny. In one of the network drives, they had like version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, version 5, and then there was a little text file there that said, only trust version 3. So this is the mess you're dealing with, right? So like I said, this slide makes me cringe. And you know what else is not on here? It's all the emails that were going back and forth between everybody. Constantly going back and forth. Oh, I forgot to put this into the SharePoint site. Oh, I need to modify this. Oh, there's comments that need to go here. So when we got together, we needed to find some kind of better solution. Oops. So before we started all this, let's see, I got to remember. So as you can imagine, when you're doing that much copy and paste, Excel errors, I keep hitting the wrong button. Excel error or copy and paste errors everywhere. Another problem you ran into is you had multiple versions of experiments. Not only that, you didn't have a standard template of the Excel versions. So when we decided we actually wanted to do some machine learning to pull all that historical data in, different formats everywhere. So it's very difficult to pull this data in. So the versioning problem, it's still a problem actually that we haven't solved. But the big thing is you're paying a scientist. You're paying scientist salary for somebody doing something copy and paste that my 11-year-old daughter could do. So it's a big problem. And we realized it was taking them about 2 to 3 hours per experiment just to do that, or more. So what did we do? We looked at the products that we had on site. So we have E-Workbook with Advanced, and we have inventory, and then of course, with all that, you get the REST APIs. They were pretty new to E-Workbook. Some people had been using it, but a lot of them hadn't. But we like the idea of E-Workbook being the central place for all this data. Everything comes in, and it was perfect for that. The beauty of using Advanced, we could make these templates that were standardized, that didn't change, but also with Advanced, they're actually very flexible. There's quite a few things you can do, but it keeps all your data very structured. It eliminates handoffs. In other words, you didn't have somebody emailing Excel spreadsheets back and forth to each other and trying to figure out which one's the most current. And the other thing we were able to do with it was real-time data, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but we use the Attune product, the data manager, which is a great product to, easy way to pull your data into experiments very easily. So when I talk about inventory though, I'm going to talk about inventory in kind of an unusual way. So most people use it for tracking samples and things like that. Well, we needed something to replace SharePoint. We wanted something that was already integrated into eWorkbook, and but we didn't want to build a whole separate database. We didn't want to have to mess with all this. But I was really stuck. I'd love to take credit for this, but it's Craig Williamson at IDBS that came up with the idea, and he said, "Why don't you use inventory?" Well, inventory is for materials, equipment, samples, right? It's not for like managing a workflow. And he's like, "Oh, no, give it a try." Well, sure enough, we actually took it and used it in a very non-standard way, which is kind of a cool thing about, it says a lot about inventory, very flexible. So not only did we track just the sample requests that were coming in, but we were able to actually track, when they were expecting this stuff, when did it have to be delivered, things. Now you're probably asking, why didn't you use request? I'll get to that later. But really adding this inventory step saved a lot of headaches, because all the escalations that I was talking about earlier were all from the emails of, "Oh, I think I sent you that. You should have this. This should be done." Sorry, how bad am I doing on time? Okay, great. All right. And so inventory turned out to be a great tool, but because we used it in a very non-standard format, we really had to rely on the REST APIs. That was really the key, because we had to get data out of inventory that inventory wasn't meant to do. So we went to the REST API, and again, Martin and Michelle at IDBS were really great about helping us get everything started, everything set up. But it gave us a way to just make all this stuff automatic. Okay, so here's my cringy slide, right? All the chaos, and like I said, it doesn't even include all the emails, and actually I just tried to make it cleaner for y'all, but it was really pretty nasty. So we went from that to this, a very, very simple workflow. What we did is we were able to take a lot of the workflows that they were already doing, all the copy and paste, all the routine things that they were doing. We were able to turn these into clicks. So the data came from the clinical planning system, and it flowed automatically into inventory. And then all the scientists had to do is open up the quick finder, select what experiment they wanted to do, and it pulled that data in. The minute they pulled that data in, there was another click that went out to the compound database, pulled in all that compound data, and guess what? All the calculations are happening like that. You're not sitting there trying to reformat Excel. You're not trying to do anything. All that data is right there for you. And it also automated things that were very tedious. Again, the old system relied a lot on email, where, okay, I need this much compound. Can you order this for me? Can you do this? Can you do that? This way we were able to make it as simple as just a few series of clicks down the line. One scientist actually kind of complained, because they're kind of like, "You took my brains out of this thing," right? Because it's doing all the calculations for you as soon as it comes in. But the cool thing, and then the other thing too was there was always errors, right? You always had a copy and paste error, or a lot of times scientists would reuse a template from another experiment, and again, more copy and paste kind of things, right? Where the wrong data was in there. Well, the nice thing by doing this, it's actually much easier for them to just start with a fresh template, click import, everything's right there. And automatically too, if there was any kind of errors, we were able to trap most of the errors, telling them exactly like, "Oh, there's a problem here, there's a problem there." So they'd get warnings. Anyway, at the end of the day, the group calculated that they saved for each experiment, they saved about 3 hours. 3 hours per experiment. So what was the impact of this? It forced us to to make some new connections. At the time that this all started, we didn't have real strong connections to a lot of these other outside systems. It was kind of hacked. And so with the Attune Data Manager product, we were able to get better about making more solid connections, using APIs a lot more instead of SQL statements, things like that. Cleaner data. So we got 4 new, and I say 4, it was really quite a bit more integration types, but that worked really well for us. We have more integrations planned. So one of the other integrations that we're actively working on right now is with another Danaher product called Gene Data GDB. What's the product name? I'm forgetting. But the GDB. So if we'll call it GDB. We're doing that to bring genomics data right into eWorkbook. Right? So, and again, with the APIs, we're able to do that easily. And the beauty of this was we got advice early on so I did have to write some code, to use the API, but the code is actually pretty simple. And the smart thing we did early on was we actually made it very reusable. So the nice thing is one group sees what we're doing in this one project, and they're like, oh, I want that. Can you do that? Can you do that? And so it's worked pretty well that we made it that way. So, okay, so the case study from this then is, before it was basically chaos. There was, all the information went into SharePoint. There was a lot of copy and paste. We've kind of gone over this a bunch. Having to go to multiple databases to get their data. Had to validate against multiple sources. They were re-entering data into places. And a lot of times when there was errors, they'd almost gone too far. In fact, they'd even done the formulation, and then they had to start all over again because they caught an error later on. So you can imagine how many times experiments were repeated. After this, with the API-driven workflow, the scientists are able to initiate the experiment from within eWorkbook. So they're able to go in using the quick finder, pick their data, pick the experiment they want to do. All that flows right in, and it was with the APIs. Also, we're able to go fetch the metadata. We were able to, let's see. I should be wearing my glasses. I'm one of those people that had to start wearing glasses late in life, and I hate wearing them. So, I'm sorry. Formulations were automatically calculated without any manual input. And this was another big problem that they had, was when they reformat those Excel spreadsheets, guess what? The formulas are never always right? You copy, paste, started finding errors there. So we were able to eliminate that. Again, the warnings that were there. But the big thing that really came out of this was, like I said, they have about 20, 25 years of historical data inside Excel spreadsheets that we are having a heck of a time mining out. You would think we've been working on that for probably almost 3 years. Not our group, but a different group is trying to mine through 20 years of Excel spreadsheets, trying to pull that data out of there and put it into some kind of structured format. It's terrible, right? And we haven't been successful to this point. So I know, and everybody says, well, why don't you use AI to do that? And you know how hard that is to do with numbers? It's one thing to use large language models for, but the key word there is language, not numbers, right? So, okay, so I mentioned inventory and that we used it in a very unconventional approach. Most people use it to track their samples, to record samples, to manage chain of custody. But we used it in it's a very weird way. In fact, when you see it, I think this is why Daljet wanted me to talk about it, because he wanted me to show, just because inventory is set up for these things doesn't mean you're locked into that. And I think it says a lot about the inventory, the way inventory was designed, that you can do a lot of things with it. So we're putting all kinds of strange data in there that you wouldn't normally see in inventory. But it's everything that has to do with any kind of drug formulation. What time do they need it delivered to the animal farm? What time do they need, what kind of things do they need? There's all kinds of unusual data that you wouldn't see, but it worked great. Gave us very nice structured retrieval, no more copy and paste, minimal clicks. In fact, the thing they love, it's just a click. I guess it's 3. They have to pick the record, they have to pick the item, and then they have to, maybe 4. Very easy, very, very easy. Beats the heck out of, they were showing me how they'd have Excel on one pane and SharePoint on the other, and they're constantly copying, pasting. It was insane. So it gave the scientists a lot more time to focus on doing science versus, copying and pasting work. Why it worked. So the big thing was there was zero context switching. In other words, like I just said, they weren't going back from SharePoint to Excel, or the compound database to Excel. They were able to stay in one environment. Again, it was structured. It just came right in. It just flowed in, nothing they really had to do. Really didn't have to do any training. This is another thing I would say. I know I sound like a salesman for IDBS, but it was so simple to show people what to do. The training was really, really minimal, almost none. It's just intuitive for people to know what to do. And then, so I would say the one caveat we had with this process was a lot of this workflow should have been done in request. But there was one reason we didn't do request, and it was because the API wasn't available yet. Otherwise, we would have done more of the workflow stuff with request. So at the end of the day, we implemented this project in January of 2025, and to date, roughly, it's a little over 2,000 experiments have been done. And we estimate 3 hours per experiment has been saved per experiment. So adding up to, math is easy, right? 6,000 hours, which is roughly about 2 to 3 full-time employees, if you want to go by year versus, so it saves quite a bit of time. The cool thing about this was this formulations group has a laundry list of new things that they wanted to develop over time, and nobody ever had the time because they're spending all their time copying and pasting. Sorry, I got to quit standing in front of that speaker. But now, when you free up 3 hours like that a day, or, because they're doing 118, oh, sorry, it's not on this slide. I'll go ahead a little bit, I guess. They're doing 118 experiments a month. So when you think of 3 hours times 118, they're able to do a lot more than they were able to do before. The big one, of course, is the, no copy and paste errors. People aren't having to go back and redo experiments, going back to fix things. Even if they have to fix things, at least it's all in one file or one place now, all in the workbook. And the big thing was all the systems that were consolidated in one workflow. In fact, that one is one click. We used the data manager tool that I was telling you about. We set that up to be able to go out and fetch all that data and pull it right into eWorkbook with a single click. Now, actually, I think that click is running like 6 or 7 queries. It takes about 20 seconds to run. But think of the time it saves versus all the copy and paste they were doing before. So yeah, I let the cat out of the bag. 118 experiments per month. And so when I say that 3 hours saved, by the way, that's a very conservative estimate because we're talking about scientist time. We're not talking about the people who are on the clinical side who need to see what happened or all the emails that were saved going back and forth. So there's quite a few people that we saved a lot of time for. They're directly impacted by this. It's so much easier for them to go into inventory. Most of them even don't even go into inventory. They just go into eWorkbook and see exactly what they need. It took us about 2 years to do this. Now, I don't want you to think it took us 2 years to figure out APIs. It did not take 2 years to figure out APIs. This template is very complex. It does multiple ways of formulating compounds and multi-doses, multi-compounds. It's a pretty complex system. But if it wasn't for the APIs, though, I don't think we would have been able to do this project. So I think this slide kind of says a lot when you see we implemented this in January of 2025. And you can see there was a little slow there in the first month. Not really, though. If you look at that bottom line, that's the number of experiments done per month. And you can see it was pretty consistent. And I think that has a lot to do with, it's been brought up today about how when you get the users involved right away. I had the users involved right away. We designed it very, very well, which meant that the adoption was super smooth. And again, E-Workbook is pretty intuitive, for most people, I think. It's very easy, even though we had a very complex template. I mean, it's got multiple tabs, multiple perspectives, tons of, like 4, 5, 6 canvases per perspective, and I think there's 12 perspectives in there, so there's a ton of stuff in here. But the users adopted it and kept using it. And honestly, nobody complained. So it was great. It was very easy. But you can see it's pretty steady increase, over time. We just keep accumulating more and more experiments. So why it works? I mean, the big thing, 10 minutes, okay. All right, I gotta move it. All right, I'll go fast. Why it worked? The data flows to the scientists. They weren't going out trying to chase down data. Everything came into them automatically. The automation replaced the repetition. We've talked about that 100 times already, the copy and paste problems. The big thing for them was having one authoritative source. They knew they could go to one place and find the right data. And the other cool thing about everything we did, this is just one example. We've used the API in a ton of other examples. And the nice thing is, we've really built it once. Sometimes we have to go in and modify the code, but we built it once and we've been able to use it for other projects. So I'll just kind of glance over this one here because I think it's pretty obvious. The managers and us in IT are pretty happy about this because it was higher throughput, lower error rates, faster experiments. We have meaningful data. It's all the obvious stuff, right? Lower maintenance. I mean, once we got this thing up and running, we're working on version 2 right now because we're just adding. We're not really repairing, we're adding more to this thing. So it's been very stable. It's worked really well. And it's reproducible. In fact, this template is mainly used in 2 sites in Biberach and Vienna, and everybody is using Biberach, Germany, and Vienna, Austria. And so everybody knows what everybody's doing even, right, on 2 different sites. Of course, we said we return the scientists' time. I mean, scientists' time is very expensive. They should not be spending time copying and pasting. I don't know if I've hit that hard enough, but it's something that's very important. They really like the pre-populated templates. They can come in and click buttons, and everything is there for them. And they could do something that was taking them 3, 4, 5 hours before is now taking them minutes. And the warnings and having everything in a single place, and they're actually able to do a lot more work now with the same headcount. So lessons learned. Very tempting thing, especially for people like me, is you want to start with the technology. Like, this would be cool if we could do this, right? But we really had to start with focusing on the pain. What's the big problem that we got to solve here? And so I would say definitely focus on that. There was a lot of temptation to do some things, and we did make those mistakes here and there, but that's definitely a big problem. Thinking cross-functional. The problem I've realized with code is fun and all that until you realize somebody else needs that code, and you have to maintain that code over time. And so you don't want to be writing this code multiple times. You want to write it once and have it work for many people. We built for the workflow, not around it. There's a lot of places that we probably could have skipped, but we really worked through it and got the data coming in as we needed and did it well, I think. We started measuring from the start. So we knew we wanted to see what kind of impact we were going to have, because there was actually a lot of pressure by the management of this group to see what this would really do. So we had to keep an eye on the numbers, and thankfully the adoption went very smooth and very fast. Small wins. We did a lot of small things while we were developing that people could see right away, and it got the momentum excited. So by the time we finally released, everybody was pretty excited about it. And I'd say the last one is the colleague that I was working with. She's a very eager person, and she's got lots of ideas. But you got to manage expectations, because even though some of these things sound really good, it may not be the best thing to do. Okay, so we started all this with a simple Excel spreadsheet. We built it with the end users. The cool thing about this was actually one of the end users became a spreadsheet developer on his own. And I don't know if you built a lot of templates, you know, probably 75 or 70% of your time is just making everything look right. And, you know, so it was really nice. They could make everything look right. I just do the nuts and bolts behind it, and everything would go pretty smooth. And I mentioned earlier that this template is still evolving. I have a feeling we're going to be evolving this thing for the next 5 years, adding new features. Where are we right now? So, yeah, we finished the automation stage. In fact, we are going to probably start working on integrating the request module. And we're getting to the point of doing some data mining. So right now, the nice thing about this is we can get all the data out without too much trouble. The group is working on trying to figure out what they actually want to do with this data. And then eventually, we want all this data to be able to go to our corporate data lake, which we're still trying to figure out what that even looks like. Okay, so I could go over this, but we're running short on time. I think we all kind of got the point. I would just say, you know, there's so much inside of eWorkbook inventory requests that you can do that you probably think you have limitations on, but talk to IDBS, get the APIs, start working with the APIs. And if you're intimidated, I'm a hack. I'm not a professional programmer. I've told you I was a biologist up till 4.5 years ago, right? And you can do this. And I'll give you one more cheat. Just use Claude. You can upload the API documentation to it now. I wish I'd have had this 4 years ago when we started this. But now I go and somebody says, oh, I need this. Claude already knows the API. It can write the code for me. Okay, well, thank you very much. All right.
Thank you for that. I think actually we caught us up time.
I tried to keep us on time.
Yeah, actually we caught up time, so there is still time for questions. Any questions for Brad? He was saying everything so well.
How did you prioritise where to start? Because there's a lot of requests coming in. I know a lot of other organisations have this. How did you decide what's the most important things to address first?
Yeah, okay. It started with kind of Sylvia. Her name was Sylvia, and she's great. She had so many ideas. We started with her writing out this list, and then we just started working on, if you couldn't get these things, you know, what's the one thing you want to have? You know, so, and it sounds easy to do, but there was a lot of arguments, you know, about, like, not with me, but within our team, you know, what do we really need? I mean, we knew the compound database stuff was obvious. We knew a lot of the obvious things. But at the end of the day, we knew that we needed to recover a lot of scientists' time. So we really spent a lot of time focused on things that would bring efficiency. So.